service,
love,
abundance,
significance,
hope,
gratitude,
freedom,
wisdom,
faith,
security,
peace,
discipline,
kindness,
truth.
Well, good Monday morning, beautiful person. You are listening to Things I Learned on Sunday, a recalling of insights harvested through conversation, observation, and the example of others. Now, the purpose of this podcast is that you would share in the powerful impact of these insights along with me while you begin your day, and hopefully nourish your soul to start your week off right. Welcome. So this last week, I got to do something that was incredibly special.
The Green Valley Bible Camp in Rogers, Arkansas. For me, it is like the first time in over 20 years.
With someone who's incredibly special to me.
You ready to do this thing? A good deal.
I got to go back and visit the church camp that I grew up going to every summer, Green Valley Bible Camp. And I got to go spend this time with Ron Cowan, who was director of this camp for 17
the original
years.
sign that you put here?
Green Valley Bible Camp. What can I say about this camp? This was the place from age, I believe, 11 all the way to age 19 that I went there 1 week during the summer, the end of July, beginning of August every year. And it was my favorite place that I could possibly ever be. And that week was my favorite week every year. I grew up going to this camp from being just 11 years old and starting to understand Christianity to 19, to where I was having more mature thoughts, being on more of the meat of the word. And through this time, I got to meet these people that ended up becoming heroes of the faith for me. These examples that I look up to of very godly people. I come to really admire and respect Ron because he was a leader. He was an associate minister at the Church of Christ in Cassville, and he had 3 girls that were around my age. He worked with the youth there as well. And he had a very kind spirit for a Christian man. He just came across as a very gracious and kind person. And so I immediately saw him as someone that I wanted to look up to and someone that I wanted to emulate. And that relationship formed then. Well, the last time that I had seen Ron, I believe I was 19. I think I counseled that year. Maybe that was the first year I was a counselor at camp. And after that, I didn't go back and counsel. I made my move to Springfield, and the rest is history. And so 20 some years later, I had not seen Ron in all of these years. And he ends up moving to Springfield. You see, his amazing wife, Barbara, passed away young just very recently. And 2 of his 3 daughters live in Springfield. And so they had him move up here to Springfield to be close to them. And Ron started attending church at Sunset. And so we started walking together. We walk together for an hour every week, and we get to talk. And it started, of course, with us reminiscing about camp and about the different people that were directors and counselors and campers there. And it was so neat to reconnect with Ron as 2 adult men and have conversations with him as 2 men would, just going on these walks every day. And so understandably, this has been, let's say, a challenging time in Ron's life with the passing of his wife, with him moving to Springfield and not knowing people like he did in Cassville. Ron, at the same time that he was directing at this camp, he was teaching history and he was coaching. So directing a camp, coaching, teaching, he was going 24/7, and he was like the unofficial mayor, I think, of Cassville. If you had a kid go through the school system or through the church, you knew Ron. And then you contrast that to coming here to Springfield, and he just didn't really know anyone here whenever he first made the move to Springfield. So on our walks and talks, we made the decision that we wanted to go visit the camp that he directed and lived at for so many years, and that's Green Valley. And so we make this trip, and it was a very surreal experience. What do you think? Does this bring back some memories?
Yeah, there's some new construction, but it just, it just seems the same.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. Getting to go to this camp and talk to Ron, first of all, about his time at the camp and his experiences there, because they were obviously much more intimate and I don't know if they played a bigger role in his life, because even though I only went a week a year, it really shaped me, and those people that I admired really shaped me.
You were in the littlest.
Yeah,
with me. That was our first year together. Your first year and my first year.
But Ron had the experience of actually living and directing at the camp, so it was a huge part of his life.
But I mean, basically everything that's been done here was on top of what you've done, right?
Yeah, I'd have to say I had a pretty good influence.
Yes, I would agree, Ron.
And so we get to this camp, and it is hard to describe the singular and surreal experience that it was going back there roughly 23 years later. This is going to sound really funny and really stereotypical, but it looks a lot smaller to me now. I get to see some of these incredibly familiar sights. The old basketball court. We waged many wars right here. I remember Ron sitting on the bench, coming off of the bench, and everybody was like, you guard him. You do not let him be open, because he could be cold and he'd shoot and he'd hit it every time.
You're just filling void. You're wasting your time trying to guard me.
That's right. I remember us sitting on the steps in the morning and being so dog tired because we were so excited. I would be so wired that I wouldn't sleep all night. And then I was hungry because I felt like I was eating less whenever I was at camp. This is probably like a really good diet and workout for people because of all the going up and down the hills. But I would be so exhausted, and we would sing the song, Father, We Thank Thee for the Night. If you've ever heard that song, it's a song that's also a prayer of blessing. In those steps, there was such a presence of God at those steps, and going back to those steps, really the most spiritual place in my mind that I've ever been. It was very surreal. And then going to the pavilion.
So I have a picture. It's me and Lindsay and Derek Linton, remember him? And I think his name was James, and I'd have to look at it. I want to say we probably would have been standing about right here.
Which is now a little bit different than it was once before. I have a photo inside the pavilion one year, like as a junior or senior, when our guys had a skit. And I had such good memories of learning about God and worshiping and putting on skits in that pavilion. Then moving on to the pool. The old changing area, where you learn to change with other boys for the first time and not be scarred for life. I remember us playing water polo, and I remember the wars that were waged in that pool for the survival of humanity. I remember coming out of that pool just every day and like having scars, like nail marks and scratches all over my body because of the fights that would go down in there that were all in good fun, like just to win the game. I remember whenever little kids would act too crazy or get to yelling that they would get dunked. And like there was a certain hierarchy that came, with the older kids and the younger kids. And younger kids, a lot of them learned discipline during this time of being in the pool. I'm sure that doesn't happen at all today, not at all, but it did back then. I remember being dunked, and I remember doing the dunking, and people learned how to behave like through this all in good fun, rough housing, and trying to win at these games of water polo.
Let's go up to the guy's side.
I remember the cabins, and I remember having coffee talk, and I remember John King talking to all the guys, and before we would go to bed at night, like having these amazing deep discussions.
Now, they didn't have no guardrail in my day. That's for sissies.
Camp, it made me think of how camp is so much like this side of heaven, because you get to be around these people that not only are they trying to live for God, but they get to be around people the whole week just like you, that all they're trying to do is live their lives for God, and they don't have any of the distractions of the outside world. They don't have any of the influences of the outside world. It's just everyone encouraging each other, edifying each other, learning and teaching, growing, encouraging. It's a very singular experience to be a part of a camp where God is being served. And I can only imagine that this is a glimpse, just a glimpse of what heaven must be like. I can remember getting to go up and play softball on the big kids softball field. If you made the all-star game, you got to go and do that. And we would sit on the bleachers up there and we would all just chat and enjoy a good time together. I remember going to the mess hall for lunch and walking around to go in and just talking with your friends, like through the screen as they're eating on the inside, and talking with your friends in line. Yes, we would have these on both sides, and then we'd have the serving right down the middle. So Ron, I can remember Barbara showing us what to do with the dishes whenever it's our turn to serve and to clean up. I just remember so many good times at that camp, and I'm very thankful for Ron and his wife, who did an amazing job of running that camp. And it was so neat to see Ron. I just felt like he came alive as much as I came alive of being at that camp again, and us just being able to talk about the different good times that we had there. And so I started asking Ron about the camp, and I thought it was so neat to hear some of his insights from his time there.
All the times I've walked through these things,
I bet.
check them, clean them out.
Sure. Once or twice.
I'm taking more. Can't even get away from that.
It was just a great experience.
What would you say was one of your favorite parts of directing at the camp?
I was thinking it's a Sunday afternoon meeting. All the people coming in, new kids.
Really?
Yeah. And then just kind of the everyday operation of the camp. I enjoyed that.
Really? Like the everyday operation during the sessions, or just all the time?
During the session.
During the sessions.
There really wasn't anything I didn't enjoy.
What's a happy moment from you being a counselor at camp?
I think I got to baptize several kids. Just seeing all those kids coming in, we hadn't seen each other in a year.
Right.
Hugging each other.
Right.
And all that. They're just so excited to be there.
Yes.
I think probably the happiest moment, not because it was they were leaving, but all the people would come by and thank you. Thank you for taking care of them. It's hot.
That's kind of poetic.
Yeah.
1 Corinthians chapter 10, it really shows you how important it is for the Christian to understand the Old Testament so that they have reference and a deeper understanding of the New Testament. Because whenever we start off 1 Corinthians chapter 10, it talks about the people being led as they passed under the cloud and they all passed through the sea. And it sounds very cryptic unless you understand the Old Testament. Try to read 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 1 through 13. If you don't understand what it's talking about, if you haven't read the Old Testament story, and you're going to have a hard time. So that was really our focus in class. Something that I talked about in class that I don't know if this group of C4C students knew was how the Bible is canonized. And I honestly don't think most people know how the Bible is canoned. Like, they don't know why the Old Testament is put in the order the way that it is, and why the New Testament is put into the order the way it is. So I'm getting ready to give you the 30,000 feet way up there understanding of how the Bible is canonized, how it's ordered, how it's put together. So this is just the very basic 30,000 feet fundamental. But if you get this fundamental, it's going to give you a better idea, a really good idea of how the entire Bible works in concert. So really quickly here, I'm just going to give you the broad categories of how the Bible is ordered. Okay, so the first 5 books in the Bible are simply called the 5 books. That's really enlightening, right? The reason they're called the 5 books is because they don't really fit into any other category, and they're our earliest history, obviously from the beginning of time on. So you have Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. That's the 5 books. They're in a category sort of all into themselves. Then the next section of books that you have in the Old Testament is Israel's history. So that next entire library, that next entire section of books of the Bible is all about the history of Israel. Then we have the next section that's both poetry and wisdom. So this would include books like Ecclesiastes, Psalms, Proverbs. It's all those books right there that are both poetry and sort of like the spiritual philosophy or wisdom of the Bible. Then we have the books of prophecy, okay? So basically, when you get through those poetry and wisdoms books, now this is just a really fast overview, by the way, but then whenever you get through the poetry and wisdom books, from that point on, all the way through Malachi, all the way through the end of the Old Testament, I don't know if you realize this, but all of the books of prophecy are categorized together at the very end of the Old Testament. So there's your categories of the Old Testament. Then you come into the New Testament and you have the Gospels. The Gospel is a fancy way to say the good news referring to Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. Okay, so you have the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Then you have the book of Acts. So the book of Acts falls into a category completely unto itself because it is the Acts of the Apostles. It's the historical documentation of the Acts of our apostles. So the next chunk is letters. So this is Paul's letters. So this goes all the way from right after the book of Acts, where Romans begins, all the way to the last book, up until the last book of the New Testament. So this is Paul's letters. And then finally, this leads us to the final book. And obviously, the final book of the Bible, of the New Testament, it stands in a class completely of its own. This is the book of Revelation. So very quickly there, within a minute or two, I just explained to you in very broad strokes, 30,000 feet, how the Bible has been canonized, how the Bible has been ordered together. But here's the thing that if that didn't blow your mind, if you didn't know that already, that is going to blow the back right off of your brain and will be well worth the cost of admission to listen to this podcast. Okay, here it is. 5 Israeli poets of wisdom prophesied that the Gospels and Acts were letters of Revelation. Okay, I'm going to say that one more time, and I'm going to timestamp this point in the podcast and put it in the description below this video. If you're just listening to this video, at some point you'll want to get to a place, if you didn't already know this, where you can write it down. The 5 Israeli poets of wisdom prophesied that the Gospels and Acts were letters of Revelation. If you memorize this, and I may say it enough that you memorize it, then you will literally be able to recite the entire canon of scriptures, because that's exactly how I just gave it to you without looking at any notes. The 5 Israeli poets of wisdom prophesied that the Gospels and Acts were letters of Revelation. So the five books, Israel's history, poets of wisdom, so that's the poetry books and the wisdom books, prophesied, so this is the prophecies, that the Gospels, the 4 Gospels, and Acts, its own book, were letters, Paul's letters of revelation. The 5 Israeli poets of wisdom prophesied that the Gospels and Acts were letters of revelation. This will also help you, whether you're in the Old or New Testament, when you're trying to look something up, you can ask yourself, what am I looking up? What category does that fall under? The 5 Israeli poets of wisdom prophesied that the Gospels and Acts were letters of revelation. If you memorize that, you now know and can recite at any time the entire canon of the Bible from Old Testament to New Testament. So this weekend, Jolie and I got to go with some of our C4C students to the lake. Doug and Jill supplied their boat and had a friend of theirs with them, and we had an absolute blast. And it was basically all day from like 9 in the morning. I think we got back, maybe it was like 8 that night. So we spent the entire day at the lake, had lunch together on the lake, and we went to eat together for dinner that evening afterwards. And I'm sure you've experienced this before in your own life, but whenever you do something like that, where you spend an entire day with someone, it's rare that we get that kind of quality time with other people. And because of that, we felt like we knew these people better. And there were things that I learned about each person that was on the trip that day that I did not know before we went on that trip. So Bree, I never knew that she loved to read murder mysteries. Caitlin, I never knew that she grew up kneeboarding at the lake. Like, she's very familiar with kneeboarding and doing things like that. And then Tanner, his thoughts on the lack of application today whenever people claim to speak in tongues, that it's not, what they're doing isn't even for the purpose of being able to interpret to someone else. It's just like they would describe it as a language between them and God. But the lack of application that he sees when he's had conversations with people about this idea of speaking in tongues. And so those are just 3 examples. And I love Mr. Rogers' favorite quote. And seeing these 3 examples, spending the day with these people makes me think of this. The quote is by Mary Lou Kaunacki, who was a nun. The quote is this: "There isn't anyone you couldn't love once you've heard their story." And Mr. Rogers loved that quote. I think if you ever watched Mr. Rogers or saw him, you know that he exuded love. And the idea is, no matter how someone acts, no matter how someone behaves, if you get to know their story, it kind of helps you to see how they got from point A to point B, why they have the identity that they have today, and we can always relate in those ways. And so it made me think, when you spend time with members of the church, it helps you to come to love that person more easily, because we all have quirks, we all have hangups, we all have challenges, and I definitely point the thumb at myself in that regard. But you get to know someone's story and you understand why they are the way they are, and you see the commonalities, and anytime we see the commonalities, it makes it easier. In Acts chapter 2, one of the reasons that the church then was bringing people every day, adding to the church daily those who were being saved, is because the other time that the word daily is used there is them meeting in the temple and breaking bread together daily. And I don't think there's any coincidence that those two are connected, adding to the number daily and spending time together daily. The more time that we spend with each other, the more commonalities we find, and the more commonalities we find, the easier it is to love, to become united, to always think the best of someone. And so that's something that was really cool, that I got to spend more time with these young people and had a blast spending that time with them this weekend. I had never thought about this before, and it's something Doug mentioned in our class. I want to go to 2 Corinthians chapter 12. I'm going to read verses 6 through 10. "Even if I should choose to boast, I would not be a fool, because I would be speaking the truth." This is obviously Paul speaking, and he's speaking about suffering. But I refrain so no one will think more of me than is warranted by what I do or say, or because of those surpassingly great revelations. Therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh. So you guys, I'm sure probably if you're in the Bible at all, know this idea of Paul having a thorn in his flesh. Paul having some kind of great discomfort or suffering that was really always there, even though we don't know exactly what the suffering or the thorn was. A thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why for Christ's sake I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, I am strong. So, I mentioned earlier the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankel. And by the way, with that caveat that you're always reading from the Word of God, I would recommend this book. One of the things that I think is really cool about this book is that what Viktor Frankel, who was a psychologist during World War II, and he was a Jew, he was rounded up, he was put into a concentration camp with everyone that he knew. Most of the people around him died. His wife died. What I find so interesting about this book is what kept him going was his desire to understand why one man would lose hope, lose meaning, wither away and die, while another man going through the exact same hardships in the exact same external circumstances could up here keep himself moving forward, give himself a strong enough meaning to survive. Now, Viktor Frankel's meaning was to be able to make it through this so that he could then share the experiences and why some men made it and why some men did not. And so when it got down to where he was a little over 100 pounds, and when it got down to where he had so little energy from this soup that they would get every night that he could barely move, while he didn't want to do anything, he could in his mind picture himself lecturing to these large universities and explaining what helped some men to make it and why some men died. And he thought this would be so valuable to humanity that he had to survive in believing that he would survive, believing he could get out, and that he would get to have these lectures, and he would have great meaning from this. Well, one of the things that you see throughout Scripture is you see the power of a relationship with God in these concentration camps. And again, this is a secular book, but you would see people that would have these impromptu worship services that would lift the spirits of these men when nothing else could. You would see someone trying to do good in service of being a creature of God for no other reason than that, and that compelled them to want to take care of others that were suffering just like they were suffering, but it gave them meaning. You would see men that whenever they were in isolation, they could not have a relationship with anyone else, that they grew in their relationship with their Creator one-on-one, and that this relationship gave them divine power, gave them divine strength to be able to move forward. And that's just something that I think is so amazing about this book. And it goes back to my first point that you can read secular books and you can read the Bible in parallel, and you can stack these books up to the standard of the Word of God and see why they're true and see where they're true and see where things are clearly spiritual and are clearly right, or see where things are clearly best. And so Doug talking about 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and talking about Paul having this suffering and talking about Paul asking God 3 times to remove this. See, I think we think about Paul being like, I delight in my sufferings because they show the power of God. We sometimes forget that Paul was flesh and blood, and he begged God. He prayed to God in 3 separate occasions to remove this suffering from him, and God wouldn't do this. And so the thing that I learned on Sunday was a simple point that Doug made, and it was this, that we not only see suffering of Paul, but Timothy speaks directly about his suffering. We see the apostles suffering in different external situations. And here's the thing that I learned. Not once did any of the apostles, with their ability to do miracles, to have miraculous power, not once did any of them use that power to heal their own suffering. I don't know about you, but I had never thought about that. They healed the sufferings clearly of other people. Paul had miraculous power. He didn't heal his own suffering. He asked God to take it away. When God wouldn't take it away, he didn't say, I'm now going to take it upon myself. These men, they made the very conscious choice where you and I don't have the exact same choice for it to be taken away like that. But they made the choice to suffer, I'm assuming, for the same psychology that Paul had. That whenever I am suffering, that suffering, as Paul would say, is made perfect, or God's power is made perfect through that suffering or through our weaknesses. Because when we suffer and there's nothing else that can take care of us, God can take care of us. And now we're talking about the inner game, and now we're talking about the mental game. You know, I don't talk a lot about this, but I've been to some dark places in my life, and that's probably not really popular to say in Christianity because we want to show our strength, or we want to show that, you know, we have great faith and that God, you know, keeps us from going to these places. Well, I definitely have been. Over the years in my life, without going into great detail about family, it's very clear that there is depression and darkness in my family tree. And even more so than that, I believe there's some real chemical imbalances within my family. And so I kind of look at my darkness, the darkness that I have had, or the depression that I have had at different times in my life, as a bug in the software. You know, I just look at it like that. It's not my fault. It's just something that comes along with the bug in the software. Now, over the years, I can absolutely say from personal experience that me having to lean on God, that has definitely drawn me closer to God and made me a stronger Christian while I've suffered. And I am the last person to say that I do that perfectly. Sometimes when it should be the first thing I do, it's the last thing that I do. But when I finally get around to it and I lean on God, it has made me closer to Him, and it has made me a stronger Christian. And so I think of Paul's words here, but I also know that Paul didn't go sit in a corner. Paul was a man of action. So I think sometimes whenever people deal with depression or they deal with darkness in their lives, in the past, ministers, churches have said, just rely on God. And I think the word just there is very telling, because they're saying, just do that. You don't need to do anything else. I believe that God blesses us with resourcefulness, and in today's day and age, He's blessed us with resources. So rather than asking God to help you, like the man who was on the roof when there was a flood, he prayed that God would deliver him from the flood, and a helicopter came, and the guy said, don't worry about it, I've prayed to God, He's going to deliver me from this. And then a guy in a boat comes, to get the guy. And the guy says, don't worry about it. Like, I've prayed to God and he will deliver me. And then the guy ends up drowning, not realizing that these were messengers of God. These were resources sent by God. Well, we have resources today. We have counseling, we have online videos, we have our friends, we have confessing our struggles to our brothers and sisters. There are things that we can do, just like with the book reading, as long as they're in alignment with the Word of God. He will give us resources, and we have to use those resources as gifts and get the help we need, but underlying it all is relying on Him to give us what we need. So if you're someone that's ever dealt with the dark night of the soul, if you're someone that's ever dealt with extreme darkness or depression, I'm not a doctor, I don't play one on the internet, but I'm certainly someone who has resources, and I can give those to you. So please message me if this is something that you're currently dealing with. I won't just say, just lean on God. I will say, God has resources available to you. Your foundation is to rely on God and to use the resources that He has given us. But what I find is so interesting is that suffering that you're going through, the darkness that you are going through, if you lean on God first in whatever you do, that suffering, the psychology here, the principle here, is that will draw you closer to God in a way that really nothing else can. So when you suffer, lean on God, just like the apostles did when they had the miraculous power to take their own suffering away. So Jolie and I, a few weeks ago, we got the opportunity to take a little vacation time, and we went to Sanibel. Sanibel is probably our favorite little place on earth. It is a little island that's off the southwest, more west than south, coast of Florida. And there's not really a whole lot to do there, and that's why we love it. Basically, you've got good places to eat, and then you have biking trails. So you can run, you can bike, there's kayaking you can do, there's paddleboarding you can do, but it's just a great time for us to unwind, to reset, and to relax, and just have a lot of uninterrupted time together and to be present with each other. One of the things, probably the most exciting surprise that happened on this trip, is we came across this turtle that I'm showing you now. This is a loggerhead sea turtle. And this loggerhead turtle, we're just walking along the beach, just enjoying an evening stroll, when Jolie sees this turtle coming up, actually sees the tracks of a turtle, and this giant 3.5 foot, 4 foot in diameter turtle that has come up on the beach. And you might notice in this footage, there's cameras from every different angle. That's because as we saw this, there was another family that summers in Sanibel that had been there for 42 years every summer, and they said they have never seen anything like this in 42 years. Normally, these loggerhead tortoises will come up on the beach to lay eggs, and they do it at night. They very rarely do it while it's still light out because there's predators. So this was an amazing experience. And I did some research on these turtles because I shot a video just specifically about this encounter, and I'll put a link to that in the description below this video if you want to see this kind of home movie of this. But I found out that loggerhead turtles, their babies will hatch, and by the moonlight reflecting off of the waves, they see to go back to the ocean, to go to the ocean for the first time. And these baby loggerhead turtles, first of all, only 1 in 1,000 will survive. And then out of these, or maybe it was 1 in 100, I'm gonna have to fact check that, I'll put it in the description. But after they leave, they will go thousands of miles away from where they were born. And when they reach adult maturity, they will find the exact same beach that they were hatched at anywhere in the world to lay their own eggs. And sometimes they travel thousands of miles in order to do this. There are all kinds of things in nature that are a reminder to me of the power and of the divine plan of God. You know, if I go for a walk and I'm surrounded by trees and woods, what you're seeing is God's creation in its natural form, the way He created it. And seeing this turtle, it was a reminder that God creates order. And that even though these tiny little turtles go out to sea when they're still babies, they can make it back thousands of miles to the same beach to go through the same process. And this has been happening over and over again for thousands of years. It's pretty incredible. And I have a lot to say about this idea of passion, because what I have found over the years being a campus minister now for roughly a decade, that one of the greatest challenges that students will come to me with is not feeling like they have a passion for anything and not being sure what they are supposed to do with the rest of their life. And so through having these conversations, it has gotten me really clear that the definition in American culture of passion is really very distorted and incorrect as to what the actual definition of passion is and the way that Scripture talks about passion. So there's 9 verses in the New International Version between Old and New Testament that use the word passion. Galatians 5:24, it says, "Those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. Since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit." So it gives a negative connotation, like passions are negative or sinful or tempting things that pull us a certain way. So that's how we see generally passion being talked about between the Old and New Testament when the actual word is used. If you look at the Greek definition of the word for the word passion is pathima. And that definition is, I think you'll find this interesting, that which one suffers or has suffered. Now remember, we're talking about the word passion. That which one suffers or has suffered. Externally, a suffering, misfortune, calamity, evil, or affliction. As of the suffering of Christ, and as also the afflictions which Christians must undergo in behalf of the same cause which Christ patiently endured. And then the next definition of an inward state, an affliction, passion. And then another definition, an enduring, undergoing suffering. So it's really interesting because we've heard of the movie The Passion of the Christ, and it's more referring to suffering. And so we see this definition throughout Scripture. Now, let me give you the English definition of passion. So the English definition from dictionary.com, it says, any powerful or compelling emotion or feeling as love or hate. The main point that I want to make, the definition today is amoral, okay? So passion is something that compels us. Powerful compulsion, emotion that compels us, but it can be positive or negative, good or bad. So the emotion itself, the way we would say it in our vernacular today, is amoral. Now, I love what the author has to say from the book about passion. You've probably heard the saying, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I don't know if that's always true, and neither do I, because it's not. I don't know if that's always true. Even the most heart-lifting career has elements of boredom and drudgery, but a passion for your work does give you something significant, the ability to achieve many more results at a much higher level than you would be able to without it. Talent's not enough. Passion is a difference maker. Our leader's passion is even more valuable because it's contagious. A leader who shows passion passes it on to followers. Passionate leaders also tend to attract new followers who already share the same passion. And so passion builds until the team is eagerly pursuing their dream together. As a leader, the first question you must ask yourself is, do I have passion for what I'm doing? If not, then it might be time to reassess your current role and duties. or maybe find a way to relight or stoke the fire within by spending time with people of passion. So the point that the author is trying to make is that sometimes when we think of passion, we hold it to this benchmark that if I'm going to do something, if there's drudgery, as he says, or if there's challenge, or if there's something about it we don't like, then that's not the thing we're passionate about and we need to move on. Even though we think that, whenever it comes to us, we probably inherently know intuitively that that's just not true. Anything you do when there's labor involved, anything that you're going to add value in doing, there's going to be some struggle. There's going to be some challenge, or everyone would be doing that thing. So if you look at Colossians chapter 3 and verse 1, it says, "Since then you've been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things." Now, obviously, the heart is just a pump that pumps blood. That's the vernacular. That's all it is. However, we have come so used to, from Scripture, looking at the heart as the area where emotion occurs. So we just know intuitively, we know by language that whenever we say something is of the heart, then that means that there's strong emotion attached to that thing. So this not only says we're to set our minds on things above, but we're also supposed to follow with our emotion on things from above. And then if you go a little bit further in the same scripture, Colossians 3 and verse 8, "But now you must also rid yourselves of all such things as these." Now, since we were talking about matters of the heart earlier, we're going to look at matters of the heart, matters of emotion, in two different ways here: anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Okay, so that's verse 8. Let's look at verse 12. "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved," and now you're going to see these matters of the heart, these emotions that are positive, "clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience." And then it goes on to say, "clothed in love." So here's the important point I want to make. When we use the word passion today, it's an amoral word. Right here, we are really given examples of passion being both positive and good, or negative and sinful. It has positive and negative states of being. Our emotional states can be positive or negative when it comes to passion. And I think this is how culture has distorted passion over the years, because today, that feeling, that emotion, it's really follow your passion. What really is being said there is do exactly what you want to do. Do exactly what feels good. Like, you have to search and search and search for what feels good because you're worth it. And if something doesn't feel good, you don't do that. That's not at all what the Bible means when it talks about setting your hearts towards God. What that means is that you set yourself to be in an emotional state to where that state moves you towards God. This is the difference between the two definitions: the distorted, the incorrect version of passion, and the version of passion that leads us towards God. So, passion is only a positive state, and this is the first thing that I learned on Sunday. It's only a positive state when it is fueled by a relationship with God. So when that student comes to me and they're asking me, okay, what should I do? I don't feel like I have a passion for anything. There's nothing that when I go into it, I'm all in 100%. I say that really doesn't matter. What it comes down to is when you look at that thing that you could do, number one, and we didn't talk about this aspect of it, but number one, can you make progress? Can you grow? Can you add tools to your toolkit doing this thing? Because if you can do that, what that means is that you make progress, you become more, and because the church is you and others, the church becomes more. If everyone grows, if everyone makes progress within their field, if everybody sets their hearts and minds on things above while they do this, then they're going to use those abilities to make the church more. That's number one when it comes to passion. Is there something that excites you that you can use within the church? And can you see a direct path to growing if you get into this career? So number one, do you see a clear path to using this passion, to moving along in this field or career or job or labor? Do you see a clear path to serving God? That's number one. And then number two, do you see a clear path to growth, to making progress? Because if you're living for God, just like we see about taking pride in your labor from the book of Ecclesiastes, if you're living your life for God, and if you're growing, and if you're laboring, and that is helping you to grow, which is helping the church to grow, and you're serving God, that's something that we can be happy about. That's something that will fulfill us, is living that life for God. So that's the correct definition of passion. If you've ever been concerned about finding your passion for something, and if it comes up empty and you've wondered why, if it comes up hollow and you've wondered why, it's because you're truly only going to be filled with the Spirit. I got to spend time with two of my C4C guys and one of their friends and spend a whole Saturday driving the 2-hour drive to Ponca, Arkansas, singing some different kinds of music at the top of our lungs really badly, and then spending the day hiking. We're basically going to do the whole route, and then we are going to end at Eden Falls, which is going to be dry mostly, and then Eden Falls Cave, which you have to shimmy through about 1.5 feet or so to 2 feet of cave to get to, and then it opens up into the Cathedral Cave. Talking, caving, sweating, getting hurt, and hanging out, and just having an all-in-all, not only quantity time, but quality time, because I think quality time lies within quantity time with these guys. One thing that I really enjoyed was it's rare that I spend time just with the guys. Like normally when we do something, we're doing it in an entire group. And that specifically, even though we didn't necessarily talk about any specific or direct topics that were just for guys, it was just guys hanging out. And when you're dealing with people of the same sex, whether it's men spending time with men or women spending time with women, there is just a different air. You act a different way. At least that's the way it is with men. Ladies, you can tell me if that's the same with you.
I know, dude, that's what I'm saying. I'm not prone to that.
If you guys get this and we didn't make it, tell our families that we love them.
So we just got to be men, hanging out on this trip together, and it was an absolute blast. Ponca, Arkansas, Lost Valley is really known for Eden Falls Cave. So there's this place at the very end of this trail that you literally have to shimmy, and you can't be squeamish. You certainly can't be claustrophobic, but you have to shimmy at one point through, I don't know, maybe 1.5 feet of height in a cave, and you have to squeeze your way through this small area. And if you get through to the other side, you come out in this cathedral type of cave that has no opening on the other side. It's pitch black, but water seeps into this cave. And so you squeeze through into the cathedral cave, and you end up right there where there is a waterfall in this cathedral cave. Him and I are using his light because we're in the back of this cave. I'm going to flip it around. And so we did a lot of hiking to get to this point. We did a lot of exploring. You can do a lot of climbing, and really the climbing, you can climb at any skill level there. There's a lot of different things that you can do. And the guys were showing off some of their athleticism while we were there. So it was a really good time. What I really learned about this trip was when the guys came into class, because all of them came into class on Sunday morning to our C4C class, I looked at those guys slightly differently. Even though the two guys that have been with us forever, I already know well. But after spending basically all of Saturday with them and having lots of quality time with them, I just knew them a little better. I was a little closer to them. I felt that much more comfortable around them. And I'm sure that's how they felt about me, and that's how they felt about each other. But it's so imperative we spend quantity time with members of the church of the same sex.
This is Sam, expert cave crawler, crushing it, living up to the hype.
Like in Titus 2, we get the idea because of the roles men and women have and women training up the women that it is good for Christian men to spend time with Christian men so that they can learn how to be Christian men.
Okay, so that part that Sam just like shimmied through there at the end, it leads into this cave that we are in right now.
It's awesome.
So yeah, this is the cathedral cave. I don't know how well you can see it, but there's a waterfall.
And it's more concentrated than it is if we're all spending time together. In the same way, it's good for Christian women to spend time with other Christian women so that they can learn how to be better Christian women. And it's just more concentrated than it is when we all spend time together. So the first thing I learned on Sunday is really for that it's essential for me to spend time exclusively with my brothers in Christ. And I worded it that way because that's the thing that I learned. And I hope your takeaway from this is to make sure you are spending time, ladies, with other young women in the church, with other women your age, and men that you're doing the same thing, spending time with other men, so that you can edify and encourage each other. And it has that special angle to it because of who you're spending the time with. That is it for this week. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you haven't already, subscribe and tickle that little notification bell right by the subscription button. That will notify you of spiritually nourishing content appearing regularly. Consider commenting right below this video. That hits the algorithm. It gets it out to more people. Please like this video. Also helps this get spread out to more people. Do that so you and I can grow this community outside these digital walls. And most importantly, make a great day today and make a great week by letting your bright light be seen by others all week. And you can serve in that way. And as the good book says, they will know we are Christians by our love. Until next time.